Nicholas, I'm so glad to be here and have this question with you. From the past sessions we have had, it's been so much insight poured in, and I can imagine from the other answers we have had, guys, in case you have also some contribution to have, you can actually share it in the chat. And also for those who have not listened to the other lives, they are there in our YouTube channel. There we have great insight. You will definitely enjoy them. So on this subject, I believe there's so much we can learn, and I think that I'm not so sure about trauma bond. Maybe it's bonding to the event itself. Maybe clarify with me, Nicholas. Is it?
Yeah. So here we're really talking about relational issues, right? Yeah, you could say, I'm not sure if we covered this last time. I have a sense that I've said something along the lines, you can be bonded to your pain. Yes, that very often happens. We don't realize how attached we are to our sadness, to our misery, to our victimhood, right? I have a few videos on that as well. But here we're really talking about two people coming together, having trauma. So we recall what trauma is a state of hyper alertness and stress, right? And not knowing about it and coming together because they share a common pain. They share a common experience of pain in their childhood that they are mostly unconscious about. And that brings them together because somewhere along the lines of their facial expressions, their body language, their tone of voice, the things that they pay attention to and not pay attention to, they recognize one another. It's a very, very unconscious process because there are so many cues we give off with our body language that we just never realize we give off. 80, more than 80% of our communication, even here between me and you, Rene, is body language more than it is words. So they come together. They don't know that they have trauma in the first place. They just feel this attraction for one another. Oh, it's you, because we're always looking for people that we can share pain with, right? It's like it breaks our loneliness in that pain, right? So at unconscious level, oh, it's you, I want you to be my friend because you, it's me, really. So I can be acknowledged, right, in that process. And initially, what happens also is that the coping mechanisms that emerge out of that trauma experience in childhood are very often opposite. So I would like to get into this question by giving an example, but it's going to take a while and it's quite a complex concept overall. So before I get into the example, I just want to hear from you, Rene, what what you've heard so far.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing, Nicholas, is that trauma bond is when two people who have been abused recognize the abusing experience in one another.
Mhm.
Is that correct? Two people
Yeah.
who have been victims can see the reflection of themselves in one another. I don't
Yes,
know if,
beautifully put.
yeah, I don't know if you can see a lady, maybe you see in that lady or in that man, the child who was, maybe neglected, the child who was traumatized, to use the word that we're using. Is that correct?
Yes, totally. And I love the fact that you use the word this the child. You know, you can see the child in the other person. We can see the child in the other person. You can be whatever age other than being a child. So, anywhere between 20 and until you die, you have a child on your face that some people will be more attuned and some people less. So
Mhm.
we tune into that child state and, the sadness that this sort of dripping of your eyes is giving off, or the anger that a little wrinkle around the nose is giving off, whatever the frequency you've tuned in as a coping mechanism, that can be read unconsciously by many people. So you're right, yes, we see the child in the other. Yeah, go on, tell me more, because I love the way you put it.
Yeah, and I'm curious to how it can be, because when you see the abused person, you see your abused self in the other person. You want to connect with the person. So I'm curious to see, um when that recognition happens, are there stages to that recognition? is there certain triggers that maybe it takes a moment of vulnerability in that other person, maybe through body language vulnerability, that you realize, oh, I know that expression, I know that body language, I know that, you know, is there
Yeah.
something like that?
And all of this knowing happens unconsciously. And it's difficult to give you a straight answer because there's so many ways in which these signals are transmitted. There are, you know, in my opinion, almost infinite ways for us to recognize each other. But I think what I want to point out is that one of the biggest underlying motivations in anyone wanting to come together with somebody else because of this shared pain is to break the loneliness.
Mm,
One of the most powerful influences on our suffering, other than the events that we have suffered through and that we continue to carry with us because we haven't worked them through, is the loneliness that comes with it, the isolation that comes with it. And as we will see, perhaps talking more about trauma in other lives, if there is one thing that is common to all traumas, is isolation and secrecy. And again, I have a YouTube video about this that will be coming up. I think it's scheduled to come up soon. But it's the isolation, the exiliation, the secrecy around that trauma. Somebody knows that you actually have trauma, including you. You have been taught to hide it from yourself. So when we recognize these things in each other, it's like finally the opportunity to connect with somebody at this level of my own self. Okay. So with this said, let me dive now into the example that I had. And again,
yeah.
there are many examples, but I hope to illustrate in a way that can be applicable to you as a viewer to recognize whether this is happening or not in your life. So I will take two cases, one woman and one man, where the first child, the boy, grows up in a family where the father died suddenly. And so a tragic loss, a shock trauma, as we said last time. And then the mother remarries with somebody else. And because of this tragic loss that the mother has experienced, and sort of because the mother has never really worked herself out of this tragic loss and feels somewhat responsible, she attaches to the new partner. She finds a new partner. She attaches to the new partner in a way that is almost overly clinging and protective. So she comes into this new relationship a couple of years later, as is typical. They have a child, and because now this child is the glue of this new bond with the new partner, the mother devotes almost exclusively her attention to this new child to show how much she loves her partner, right? All at the expenses of the first child. So the first child witnesses all of this, witnesses the loss of the father, witnesses the almost the abandonment of the mother, psychological, emotional abandonment of the mother. Plus, the two parents are very busy working, so there is not much of them at a physical level itself. So this child lives in an ambience of emotional neglect. Um, and because he's rather self-sufficient, he manages to get through life. You know, if he has to come back at 2 p.m. and open the house and cook for himself or reheat something for himself until the parents come back later around 8 p.m., that's fine. He can do that. But really, what becomes a continuum in his developmental line is the isolation, the loneliness, and this sense that emotionally is not acknowledged. Right? Okay, so that's the boy. And the boy grows up with a coping mechanism. This will be important to know after, that says, okay, nobody gives me attention, so I'm going to give attention to myself, and I'm going to care for myself alone to compensate what I'm not being given. So this child becomes avoidant of other people and sort of more self-focused. self-centered in a way. The other child, the little girl, comes from a family that will never divorce, and where there will be no losses, tragic losses, like in the first child. But unfortunately, one of the two parents is an abusive alcoholic, a raging, abusive alcoholic. And the reaction of the parent that is not alcoholic is to please, devote, and consume all their energy for this other partner, just to basically keep the family alive and to keep the child safe. Because when the raging alcoholic abusive explodes, things you would think only exist in movies become real for that family. Okay? So the
Mm-hmm.
mother walks on eggshells and is devoted to pleasing this other partner. And by doing that, even though her main motive is to protect the child, she is actually not paying attention to the child as well. She also ends up emotionally neglecting the child, asking to the child to do exactly what she does or he does, which is people please. So the child grows up with a very other person oriented focus. It's all about pleasing the others, right? And neglecting oneself, one's own needs. This person becomes very clingy to um, other people, just like the mother of the first boy, right? Um, and or the father, by the way. There's no gender judgment here. It could be any of the two genders. um, and so that's the coping mechanism of this person that has been neglected in childhood. Now, when these two people meet, what do they have in common, Rene? If you followed my story, what do they have in common?
They both have in common the feeling of abandonment. It's one.
Hmm.
The feeling of uh, rejection, and the feeling of that they need, number one, someone to, like for the lady, we have taken her as the lady right now. She needs someone to validate her, and the man has been used to validating himself, taking care of himself, and he is self-centered.
Yeah,
So I think that's one of the things
yeah,
that connect
beautiful.
those two. Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful. So when you bring these two people together, what happens? The self-centered person is very confident about his or her opinion, right?
Yeah.
They've grown a sense of themselves that says, I know what to do. I have control of life. I know who I am. I know what the world is about. And my judgments are super important. Why they're super important? Because they needed that to survive in their childhood experiences, right? So when they come into the relationship and they give these judgments to the other oriented person, the girl in this case, the other oriented person feels somewhat a relief,
Mm.
because now these judgments are confident. They're not necessarily, negative. They don't necessarily are trying to attack the person. And there is a sense that she is getting some form of attention that she never got, right?
Mm-hmm.
She is
Mm-hmm.
getting guidance. She's
Yeah.
getting structure, which in a alcoholic abusive family is very rare. There is no structure, right? Anytime can be any reason to explode, right? To break structure completely. So she's getting that structure. She's getting that focused attention. And him, there is now somebody who is fully devoted to him, and sort of really trying to please this person. And so, for the first time in the life of this child, they are experiencing a positive kind of attention, right? A positive kind of emotional acknowledgement. So, at the beginning, their coping mechanism being the opposite work perfectly to bring them together. And the trauma that is at the bottom here unconsciously is also bringing them together, because there is this effect oh, it's you, I recognize you, right? I want to break my loneliness. But sooner or later, these newness in the couple, the fact that the boy is becoming acknowledged emotionally, and the fact that the girl is receiving some structure, begins to form cracks in their coping mechanisms, in their ego shell, if you like, right? They have created this shell around themselves by instilling a behavior in themselves very strongly. And now, because they are confronting something that was never there in their life, this shell begins to crack. And when it begins to crack, what happens is that fear emerges. Fears of change emerges because I don't know how to deal with the world in any other way but the way that I've learned to deal with in my family environment. And this happens for everybody, but people who are secure and who have had rather positive experience in childhood are a lot more tolerant of change. People who are insecure because they come from very insecure childhoods are much less tolerant of change. So now the ego shell is beginning to crack, and really what is being asked is for the person who is self-centered to move towards other-centered ways of being, right? To shift away from the self-centered and to move towards other-centered. And the person who is very other-centered should move towards more the self-centered style, right? She should become more able to dedicate time to herself, to think more about her future and her vision and what she likes and what she wants, right? And the more self centered person should be more like, oh, I want to do this, but what about my partner? Will they like that? Um, will they be really happy as much as I am to do that, right? Um, when the opportunity presents for them to begin shifting in each other's direction, that means abandoning their locus of control, their center of control. And that is very, very scary. So now the two people, what will happen is that they will commonly retreat in their coping mechanism. So there was a little opening. You can see my hands here, a little opening, a little cracks between the fingers. And oh, no, 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 that's too dangerous. No, no, no. Because the world is as I see it, right? The world is dangerous. The world is neglectful. The world can burst anytime, or the world can bring tragedy anytime. So there are many things that need to happen for this movement towards each other, and this shift towards each other and the healing to occur. It's a very complex mechanism, I'd say. So as you can see, this question has brought out a lot of, not only a lot of complexity, but really a lot of things to talk about. And so I'm glad we were able to dedicate a full live to this topic. Before we finish, I just would like to hear a little bit from you, Rene, to see what you heard and understood. But we will have a chance to continue if we don't manage to wrap up the whole subject.
Absolutely, it's such a heavy illustration how you've shared, and it really shows how, like you said, when two people meet in a point of isolation, loneliness, and what image got in my head is that when you're in a dark space and you think you're alone and you're wondering, is anybody there? Then you hear somebody's here in this dark space. No, you're connected in that dark space. It's dark, but you're connected in it, you know?
Mm,
So
yeah,
it's such a very serious situation. And like you said, many people go through it and people are able to, experience it even right now. I'm sure if you, for those who are viewing, maybe you have such experiences, you can say to the chat, or because of time, you can actually reach out to Nicholas on his website, Your Shriket Bansko, have a consultation, and you'll be able to connect you on that subject. Thank you so much, Nicholas, for this particular
yeah,
subject. I think some people might even want to have more questions about it. In case you have an email, we might actually have another part just on this question in itself.
yeah. And just
So
on that note, Renee, actually, I love the analogy that you just gave me. So next slide, we will just start where we left off here with this image of a dark room, and finally discovering that there is somebody in that dark room that you thought you were all along unconsciously, and how that mirrors these trauma bonds that we've been talking about. So I look forward to the next slide and to us being together. Thank you, Rene, for today.
Thank you so much, Nicholas. Thank you also for the ones who have joined. And until next time, guys, if you have not subscribed to our YouTube, please do subscribe to our YouTube. You'll get a notification immediately when we go live. And until next time, we shall talk soon. Thank